The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the bridal suite as I stared at my phone screen in complete disbelief. There, in crystal clear high definition, was my maid of honor Jessica Palmer with her lips pressed against my husband's mouth. Her manicured hands tangled in his hair while my wedding reception continued just 50 feet away. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m., exactly 23 minutes after Ryan and I had cut our wedding cake together, smiling for the cameras like the perfect couple we were supposed to be. I had stepped away from my own reception for just 10 minutes to touch up my makeup and grab my phone charger from the bridal suite. 10 minutes to catch my breath after the whirlwind of the most important day of my life. Instead, I caught my best friend since college and my new husband in the most intimate betrayal imaginable, and I had filmed every devastating second of it. My hands trembled as I replayed the video, hoping somehow I had misunderstood what I was seeing. But there was no mistaking Jessica's distinctive red hair cascading down her emerald green maid of honor dress, or Ryan's navy blue suit that I had helped him pick out 3 months ago. The outdoor string lights from our Riverside Gardens Estate wedding created the perfect romantic ambiance that I had spent months planning, except it was illuminating my personal nightmare instead of my fairy tale ending. The worst part wasn't even the kiss itself. It was the way Jessica pulled back and whispered something in Ryan's ear that made him laugh, the same laugh I had fallen in love with when we met at a Portland coffee shop 4 years ago. The intimate familiarity between them was unmistakable, suggesting this wasn't a spontaneous moment of wedding day champagne-fueled poor judgment. This was something that had been building, something that had been happening behind my back while I planned our future together. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until 23 minutes ago, I thought I was living my dream life. At 28, I had built Mitchell Media Solutions from nothing into one of Portland's most sought-after social media marketing consultancies. My client roster included everything from local artisan coffee roasters to tech startups looking to make their mark in Oregon's booming business scene. I had worked 80-hour weeks for 3 years to establish my reputation, often sacrificing social events and personal time to ensure my clients received the innovative digital strategies that set them apart from their competitors. Ryan Chen had been my anchor through all of it, the steady presence who brought me dinner when I worked late and listened patiently as I strategized campaign launches over our morning coffee. As a software developer and co-founder of a promising productivity app startup, he understood the demands of building something from scratch. We were the couple that friends pointed to as relationship goals, two ambitious professionals who supported each other's dreams while building something beautiful together. Jessica Palmer had been my college roommate at the University of Oregon and my closest friend for 7 years. She was the one who introduced me to Ryan at a networking event, claiming she thought we would be perfect for each other. She was the first person I called when Ryan proposed during a weekend trip to Cannon Beach, and she cried actual tears of joy when I asked her to be my maid of honor. Jessica worked as a digital marketing manager at Foster & Associates, one of Portland's most prestigious marketing agencies, and we often collaborated on projects that benefited both our companies. The three of us had become an inseparable trio over the years, spending weekends exploring Oregon's wine country, taking camping trips to Crater Lake, and hosting dinner parties at my townhouse in the Pearl District. Jessica was practically family, which made the betrayal burning through my chest feel like a triple violation. She hadn't just stolen my husband, she had destroyed the friendship that had anchored my adult life and shattered the trust that formed the foundation of my most important relationships. I had been documenting our wedding day obsessively, partly for personal memories and partly because my social media marketing background had trained me to capture content constantly. The venue coordinator had given me a brief tour of the grounds during our cocktail hour, and I had been filming different angles of the reception space to share with my followers who had been invested in my wedding planning journey for months. My business Instagram account had gained significant traction by showcasing behind-the-scenes content from my own life, including the authentic story of planning a wedding while running a demanding business, walking around the corner of the main reception building toward the smaller bridal cottage. I had started recording what I expected to be a romantic shot of the garden path lit by fairy lights. Instead, my phone captured Ryan and Jessica in an embrace beside the ornamental fountain that served as one of our ceremony focal points. The same fountain where Ryan and I had taken our engagement photos 6 months earlier, the images that now decorated our guest book table and wedding favors. The audio on the video was even more damaging than the visual. Jessica's voice was clearly audible saying, "I can't keep pretending anymore, Ryan. Watching you marry her today was torture." Ryan's response made my blood freeze. "I know, baby. Just give me some time to figure out how to handle this." Sarah's business connections could be valuable for the startup launch, and I need to be strategic about the timing. Baby. He called her baby, and he was using me for my professional network while planning to leave me for my best friend. The calculated coldness of his words was somehow worse than the physical betrayal. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a drunken mistake. This was a deliberate strategy that treated me like a business asset rather than the woman he had just promised to love and cherish for the rest of his life. My mind raced through recent memories, searching for signs I had missed. Jessica's enthusiasm about helping with wedding planning suddenly seemed suspicious. Had she volunteered to handle so many details because she wanted to insert herself into every aspect of my relationship with Ryan? The way she had insisted on that particular shade of emerald green for the bridesmaids' dresses, because it would complement the venue perfectly, now felt like she had been planning how she would look in photos with my husband. Ryan's recent late nights at the office took on new meaning as well. He claimed he was working on a crucial product launch with his business partner, Mark Thompson. But what if those evenings had actually been spent with Jessica? She lived in a modern apartment complex just 15 minutes from Ryan's startup office, while our townhouse required a 30-minute commute through downtown Portland traffic. The guest book signing that had happened just before dinner suddenly made sense too. I had been mingling with my relatives who had traveled from California for the wedding, while Ryan and Jessica had been standing together at the guest book table, laughing over something on his phone. At the time, I thought they were just sharing a funny social media post or meme. Now I realized they might have been coordinating their secret rendezvous while I was distracted by hostess duties. Standing alone in the bridal suite with broken champagne glass scattered around my designer wedding heels, I faced a choice that would define the rest of my life. I could pretend I hadn't seen anything, delete the video, and try to salvage my marriage by confronting Ryan privately after our honeymoon. I could have a quiet breakdown, call off our planned 2-week trip to Italy, and handle this betrayal behind closed doors like a mature adult. Or I could use the skills that had built my successful social media marketing business to expose the truth in a way that would ensure consequences for both Ryan and Jessica's calculated cruelty. The irony wasn't lost on me that my expertise in creating viral content was about to become the weapon I used to destroy the people who had destroyed me. I understood algorithms, engagement patterns, and exactly how to craft content that would resonate with audiences and spread across platforms like wildfire. My followers trusted me to share authentic moments from my life, and this was certainly the most authentic moment I had ever experienced, even though it was also the most devastating. But first, I needed to think strategically. My business brain, the same analytical thinking that had helped me build successful campaigns for dozens of clients, began calculating the potential consequences of different approaches. Jessica worked for Foster & Associates, an agency that prided itself on ethical practices and professional integrity. Amanda Foster, the CEO, had built the company's reputation on the principle that personal character reflected professional competence. A public scandal involving one of her senior employees would not be taken lightly. Ryan's startup was in the middle of seeking additional investors for their Series A funding round. His business partner, Mark Thompson, had mentioned during the rehearsal dinner that they were scheduled to present to several venture capital firms over the next month. A viral video showing Ryan's character and decision-making abilities in such a negative light could seriously damage their prospects for securing the funding they needed to scale their productivity app. My own business would undoubtedly be affected, as well. But I had spent 3 years building a reputation for authenticity and transparency with my audience. My followers had invested emotionally in my wedding journey, and they deserved to know the truth about how that journey had ended. More importantly, staying silent would mean letting Ryan and Jessica escape consequences for their betrayal while I suffered privately. I carefully saved the video to multiple cloud storage accounts and sent copies to my personal email address. Then I opened my phone's camera app and began recording a new video, this time with myself as the subject. My wedding makeup was still perfect, my hair still elegantly arranged in the updo that had taken 2 hours to create that morning. I looked exactly like the blissful bride my followers expected to see, which would make the contrast with my actual message even more powerful. Taking a deep breath, I began speaking to the camera with the same professional composure I used when presenting campaign strategies to my most demanding clients. The broken champagne glass glittered on the marble floor behind me, and the sounds of my own wedding reception drifted through the windows, creating the perfect backdrop for the story I was about to tell. The weight of my grandmother's pearl necklace against my throat felt heavier as I processed what I had just witnessed. These weren't just any pearls. They were the same ones my grandmother had worn to her own wedding in 1952, passed down through 3 generations of Mitchell women who had all believed in happily ever after. My mother Linda had fastened them around my neck just 4 hours earlier, tears streaming down her face as she whispered about continuing family traditions and finding lasting love like her parents had shared for 53 years. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was suddenly at risk because of a 30-second video that revealed the truth about the 2 people I trusted most in the world. Mitchell Media. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Solutions wasn't just my business. It was my identity, my financial security, and my proof that I could succeed in Portland's competitive digital marketing landscape without relying on anyone else. I had started the company in my studio apartment with a used laptop and $500 in savings, working 18-hour days to land my first client, a struggling bakery that needed help reaching customers through social media. From that humble beginning, I had systematically built a client base that now included some of Oregon's most innovative companies. The owner of Cascade Coffee Roasters credited my Instagram strategy with helping them expand from 1 location to 7 across the Pacific Northwest. A sustainable fashion startup had increased their online sales by 400% after implementing my comprehensive social media campaign. These successes hadn't happened by accident. They were the result of meticulous planning, creative thinking, and an obsessive attention to detail that had become my professional trademark. My reputation in Portland's business community was built on trust and authenticity. Clients hired Mitchell Media Solutions because they knew I would represent their brands with integrity and create content that genuinely connected with their target audiences. I had spent countless hours networking at Chamber of Commerce events, speaking at marketing conferences, and building relationships with other professionals who could refer business my way. That network was invaluable, but it was also fragile. One major scandal could destroy years of careful relationship building. Ryan understood the demands of my work because his own startup required similar dedication and sacrifice. We had spent countless evenings strategizing together, him working on code for their productivity app while I developed content calendars for my clients. Our relationship had always been built on mutual respect for each other's ambitions and a shared vision of building something meaningful together. At least, that's what I had believed until 23 minutes ago. When Ryan proposed at Haystack Rock during a romantic weekend in Cannon Beach, he had talked about our future in terms of partnership and shared goals. He spoke about supporting each other through the challenges of entrepreneurship and celebrating successes together as a team. The engagement ring he had chosen was a vintage Art Deco setting that perfectly matched my aesthetic preferences, suggesting he had paid attention to details that mattered to me. Everything about our relationship had seemed thoughtful and intentional, which made the betrayal I had just witnessed feel like a complete fiction. Jessica had been woven into every significant moment of our relationship from the very beginning. She was there when Ryan and I had our first fight about his tendency to prioritize work over date nights. She was the one who suggested compromise solutions and helped us communicate better with each other. When Ryan surprised me with tickets to see my favorite band at the Crystal Ballroom for our 2-year anniversary, Jessica had been the one who helped him coordinate the surprise by distracting me that afternoon with an impromptu shopping trip. Looking back now, I wondered if her helpfulness had been strategic rather than supportive. Had she been positioning herself as the understanding friend who could provide what I apparently couldn't? During stressful periods when my business demands left little time for romance, had Jessica been offering Ryan the attention and appreciation that I was too exhausted to provide? The wedding planning process had been a particular source of stress over the past 8 months. While I loved the creative aspects of designing our perfect day, the logistics of coordinating vendors, managing guest lists, and handling family dynamics had been overwhelming. Jessica had volunteered to take on numerous responsibilities, from researching photographers to scheduling dress fittings to coordinating the bachelor and bachelorette parties. Her enthusiasm had seemed like genuine friendship, but now I questioned whether she had been orchestrating opportunities to spend time with Ryan under the guise of wedding planning. The bachelorette party in wine country 3 weeks ago took on new significance as I replayed conversations and interactions through this new lens of suspicion. Jessica had insisted on planning every detail, from the luxury cabin rental to the private tasting at 3 different vineyards. She had seemed particularly invested in making sure I had the perfect weekend, constantly taking photos and encouraging me to post content about the experience. At the time, her attention to detail had felt like love and support from my closest friend. But there had been odd moments during that weekend that I had dismissed at the time. Jessica had been unusually interested in hearing about any relationship challenges Ryan and I were experiencing. She had asked pointed questions about our communication styles and whether we ever struggled with balancing work and romance. When I mentioned that Ryan sometimes seemed distant when he was stressed about the startup, Jessica had offered to talk to him about managing pressure better since she understood the demands of the tech industry through her work with startup clients. The bachelor party had happened the same weekend, with Ryan and his friends going on a golf trip to Bend. Jessica had suggested the timing, claiming it would be more convenient for everyone's schedules. Now I wondered if she had been ensuring that she would have access to Ryan immediately after my bachelorette weekend, perhaps positioning herself as someone who could provide comfort and understanding about wedding stress. Our engagement photos, which were displayed throughout the reception venue tonight, had been taken at some of the most romantic locations in Portland. The Japanese garden, the International Rose Test Garden, and the very fountain where I had just witnessed Jessica kissing my husband. We had spent an entire day with our photographer David Kim, creating images that told the story of our love against the backdrop of the city where we had built our lives together. Those photos represented hours of genuine laughter, tender moments, and excitement about our future. Jessica had been enthusiastic about every aspect of the engagement shoot, offering to help coordinate timing and suggesting locations that would showcase our connection to Portland. She had even taken behind-the-scenes photos with her own camera, claiming she wanted to document the process for our wedding scrapbook. Her presence at the photo session had felt natural since she was going to be my maid of honor, but now I questioned whether she had been studying Ryan's expressions and body language for her own purposes. The guest list for our wedding included colleagues from both my business and Ryan's startup, creating potential professional complications that extended far beyond our personal relationships. Amanda Foster from Jessica's agency was seated at table 4 with other marketing professionals who could potentially refer clients to my business. Mark Thompson, Ryan's business partner, was at the head table with the wedding party, and his wife had already expressed interest in hiring Mitchell Media Solutions for their own side business. These professional connections represented years of careful networking and relationship building. A public scandal involving my personal life could damage those relationships and impact my ability to continue growing my business. But staying silent about the betrayal would mean allowing Ryan and Jessica to continue their deception while I suffered privately. The decision I made in the next few hours would determine not just my personal future, but the trajectory of everything I had worked to build professionally. My phone buzzed with notifications from Instagram and Facebook as guests continued posting photos from the reception. The hashtag I had created for our wedding, Sarah and Ryan Forever, was trending locally with dozens of images showing our beautiful venue, the carefully planned details, and moments of apparent happiness from throughout the evening. The irony of that hashtag wasn't lost on me as I stared at the video evidence that Forever had ended before our wedding day was even over. The financial implications of this betrayal extended beyond just the emotional damage. Ryan and I had joint bank accounts, shared credit cards, and had recently made a significant down payment on a house in the Alberta Arts District that we were supposed to close on next month. We had been planning to combine our resources to create the perfect home office space where I could expand Mitchell Media Solutions, and he could work remotely when needed for his startup. Our Italian honeymoon was scheduled to begin in 3 days, with first-class flights to Rome and reservations at luxury hotels throughout Tuscany that had cost nearly $15,000. I had been planning to create travel content during the trip, sharing our romantic adventures with my followers while showcasing the kind of authentic lifestyle that attracted premium clients to my business. Instead, I was facing the possibility of canceling everything and dealing with the financial and professional consequences of a very public relationship disaster. The timing of this discovery couldn't have been worse for Ryan's startup either. His company was in the final stages of preparing for crucial investor meetings that could determine whether they secured the funding needed to scale their productivity app. Mark Thompson had mentioned during the rehearsal dinner that they were competing against several other companies for limited investment opportunities, and any negative publicity could impact their chances of success. But as I stood in the bridal suite surrounded by the broken glass and shattered dreams, I realized that protecting Ryan's business interests was no longer my concern. He had made his choice when he decided to pursue my best friend while using me for professional connections and financial stability. The strategic calculation he had revealed in that video, considering my business network valuable while planning to leave me for Jessica, showed exactly how he valued our relationship. The wedding dress I was wearing had taken 4 months to order and required 3 fittings to achieve the perfect silhouette. It was a custom design inspired by vintage Hollywood glamour, with hand-sewn beadwork that caught the light beautifully in photographs. I had felt like a princess when I walked down the aisle 6 hours ago, confident that I was beginning the most beautiful chapter of my life. Now the dress felt like a costume for a role I had been unknowingly playing while the real drama unfolded behind the scenes. Jessica's maid of honor dress, the emerald green silk that she had insisted would photograph beautifully against the garden setting, now seemed like a carefully chosen costume for her performance as my supportive friend. Every detail of our wedding had been planned with such care and attention, from the seasonal flowers to the string quartet that played during dinner. The irony that all of this beauty was serving as the backdrop for such an ugly betrayal made the whole situation feel surreal. My followers on social media had been invested in our love story for months, watching behind-the-scenes content from dress shopping, venue tours, and vendor meetings. They had celebrated our engagement, offered suggestions for wedding details, and shared their excitement about our big day. Many had sent heartfelt messages about how our relationship inspired them to believe in lasting love. The thought of disappointing those people who had emotionally invested in our story was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. But authenticity had always been the foundation of my brand, both personally and professionally. My clients trusted me because I shared real moments from my life, not carefully curated fiction. My followers engaged with my content because they believed in the genuine emotions and experiences I portrayed. Continuing to fake happiness in my marriage would violate everything I had built my reputation on, even if exposing the truth came with significant risks. The decision forming in my mind wasn't just about revenge or public humiliation. It was about reclaiming my narrative and refusing to be complicit in a deception that would ultimately hurt more people than just me. Ryan and Jessica had made their choices without considering the impact on my life, my business, or my emotional well-being. Now it was time for me to make choices that prioritized my own integrity and future, regardless of the consequences for them. The broken champagne glass crunched under my heels as I paced the marble floor of the bridal suite, my mind racing through every interaction from the past 6 months with new clarity. Each memory I examined revealed another layer of deception that had been carefully hidden beneath the surface of friendship and love. The video on my phone was just the tip of an iceberg that had been growing beneath my notice while I focused on building my business and planning what I thought was the wedding of my dreams. I scrolled through my text messages, looking for conversations that might reveal how long this betrayal had been developing. The group chat between Jessica, Ryan, and me from our weekend trip to Mount Hood 3 months ago suddenly read differently. Jessica had suggested the trip as a way to decompress from wedding stress, offering to book the cabin and coordinate details. During that weekend, she had been unusually attentive to Ryan, constantly asking about his startup progress and offering encouragement about investor meetings. There had been a moment on the hiking trail when I had fallen behind taking photos of wildflowers for a client's nature-themed campaign. When I caught up with them, Jessica and Ryan were sitting close together on a fallen log, her hand on his arm, as they shared what appeared to be an intimate conversation. They had separated quickly when they saw me approaching, and Jessica had made a joke about consoling Ryan over his fantasy football losses. I had laughed it off at the time, but now I wondered what they had really been discussing. The cabin that weekend had 3 bedrooms, but Jessica had claimed the middle room had a broken heating unit and asked if she could sleep on the pull-out couch in the living room instead. That put her directly between Ryan's and my bedroom and the kitchen, ensuring she would be part of any late-night conversations or early morning interactions. I had admired her flexibility and easygoing attitude, never considering that the placement might have been intentional. Ryan had gotten up early that Sunday morning, claiming he wanted to make coffee and enjoy the mountain view before we hiked back to the parking area. I had stayed in bed an extra hour, exhausted from the previous day's activities and content, to let him have some peaceful time to himself. When I emerged from the bedroom, I found Ryan and Jessica sitting at the kitchen table, their conversation stopping abruptly when they noticed me. Jessica had quickly started talking about breakfast plans, but the sudden shift in energy suggested I had interrupted something more significant. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram, showing that someone had tagged me in a new post from the wedding reception. I opened the app to find a photo posted by one of Ryan's college friends, showing the dance floor with couples swaying to a slow song. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable if you knew what to look for, Ryan and Jessica could be seen standing close together near the edge of the garden. The timestamp showed this photo was taken just minutes before I had discovered them at the fountain. The realization that their kiss hadn't been an isolated incident but rather part of an ongoing interaction throughout the evening made my stomach clench with fresh anger. How many other moments had there been tonight that I had missed while fulfilling my duties as the bride? How many stolen glances, brief touches, or whispered conversations had occurred while I posed for photos, chatted with relatives, and played the role of the happy newlywed? I opened my photo gallery and began scrolling through pictures from the past several months, looking for evidence I had been too trusting to notice at the time. The engagement party at my townhouse in January revealed several concerning details when viewed through this new lens of suspicion. Jessica had arrived early to help with decorations and food preparation, but most of her assistance had involved tasks that put her in close proximity to Ryan. She had volunteered to help him set up the sound system, arrange furniture for optimal flow, and coordinate the timeline for toasts and activities. During the party itself, I had been busy hosting and mingling with guests, but several photos showed Jessica and Ryan in conversation throughout the evening. In one image, taken by my mother, they were standing together near the kitchen island, Jessica's body language suggesting flirtation rather than casual friendship. Her hand was resting on the counter close to his, and she was leaning toward him with the kind of focused attention that indicated intimate conversation rather than group discussion. The photo from our joint birthday celebration in March was even more revealing. Jessica and I had birthdays just 2 weeks apart, so we had decided to throw a combined party at a trendy restaurant in the Pearl District. I had been seated at one end of the long table, coordinating with servers and ensuring everyone's dietary restrictions were accommodated. The birthday photo, taken by David Kim, who had become our go-to photographer for special events, showed the entire group raising their glasses in a toast. But tucked away at the other end of the table, Ryan and Jessica were captured in a moment that looked distinctly romantic. His arm was draped casually across the back of her chair, and she was leaning into him while laughing at something he had said. Their body language suggested the kind of comfort and intimacy that develops between people who spend significant time together privately. At the time, I had been pleased that my husband and best friend got along so well. Now I understood that their connection had been developing into something that excluded and betrayed me. The work events where Jessica and I had collaborated took on new significance as well. 2 months ago, we had partnered on a campaign for a tech startup that needed both traditional marketing strategy and social media execution. The project required several late-night strategy sessions at Jessica's apartment, and she had suggested that Ryan join us since his experience in the startup world could provide valuable insights for our campaign development. Those evening sessions had been productive professionally, but I now remembered feeling slightly excluded from some of the conversations between Ryan and Jessica about the tech industry. They had shared jokes about programming languages and investor personalities that went over my head, creating a sense of camaraderie that I couldn't fully participate in. Jessica had made several comments about how refreshing it was to work with someone who really understood the startup mindset, praising Ryan's insights in ways that seemed designed to make him feel valued and appreciated. The client had been thrilled with our campaign results, leading to additional referrals that benefited both our businesses. But I wondered now if Jessica's primary motivation for the collaboration had been professional success or creating opportunities to spend time with Ryan under circumstances that seemed legitimate and necessary. My phone rang with a call from Emma Rodriguez, my assistant and closest friend outside of Jessica. Emma was also at the wedding reception, but she had left early to handle a client emergency that required immediate social media crisis management. Her timing was perfect because I desperately needed someone to talk to who could provide objective perspective on the situation I was facing. "Sarah, I just saw the most disturbing thing," Emma said without preamble when I answered the call. I came back to grab my phone charger from the gift table, and I saw Ryan and Jessica by the fountain. "Are you okay? Do you know about this?" The relief of having my suspicions confirmed by an independent witness was immediately followed by the devastating realization that other people had noticed what was happening. Emma was discreet and loyal, but if she had observed their behavior, other guests might have seen things as well. The thought that my wedding reception might have been the subject of whispered gossip and speculation while I remained oblivious added humiliation to the betrayal. "I recorded it," I told Emma, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have video evidence of them kissing and audio of them talking about their relationship and Ryan's plan to use my business connections before leaving me for her." Emma's sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. "Oh my God, Sarah. I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" The question hung in the air as I considered my options. Emma knew better than anyone how much my business meant to me and how carefully I had built my reputation in Portland's competitive marketing landscape. She also understood the power of social media to create viral moments that could either destroy or elevate someone's public image. Her question wasn't just about my personal response to betrayal, but about how I would handle this situation strategically. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but I need you to help me think through the implications of different approaches. This isn't just about my marriage anymore. This could affect everything we've built with Mitchell Media Solutions." Emma agreed to meet me at my townhouse after the reception ended, giving us privacy to plan my next moves without the risk of being overheard by wedding guests or vendors. In the meantime, she would discreetly observe Ryan and Jessica's behavior during the remainder of the evening, providing additional documentation of their interactions that could support my video evidence. After ending the call with Emma, I returned to examining the photos from recent months, looking for patterns that had been invisible to me at the time. The images from Ryan's startup launch party in April revealed another troubling dynamic. Jessica had attended as my +1, but she had spent most of the evening networking with Ryan's business associates and potential investors. Several photos showed her engaged in animated conversations with people who could influence Ryan's professional future. At the time, I had been grateful for her social skills and her ability to represent our friend group well at professional events. Jessica was articulate, knowledgeable about the tech industry through her marketing work, and skilled at making meaningful connections with new people. I had seen her networking as beneficial for both Ryan's business and potentially for my own future collaborations with tech companies. But reviewing those photos now, I noticed that Jessica's interactions with Ryan's colleagues had been more extensive and strategic than typical casual socializing. She had exchanged business cards with several investors, engaged in detailed discussions about market trends, and positioned herself as someone with valuable insights about startup marketing challenges. Was she building relationships that could benefit her own career? Or was she establishing connections that would be useful if she planned to become more involved in Ryan's professional life? The vacation photos from our long weekend in San Francisco last month provided the most damning evidence of all. We had planned the trip as a pre-wedding celebration, booking a luxury hotel in Union Square and making reservations at some of the city's most acclaimed restaurants. Jessica had suggested joining us, claiming she needed a break from work stress and promising to give us plenty of couple time while exploring the city independently during the day. The photo that made my blood run cold was taken at dinner on our last night at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the bay. We had asked another couple to take a group photo of the three of us with the sunset and city lights as a backdrop. In the image, Ryan's arm was around my waist, but his gaze was directed toward Jessica rather than the camera. Jessica was looking directly at him with an expression of longing that was unmistakable now that I knew what to look for. That same evening, after we returned to the hotel, Jessica had suggested we continue the celebration with drinks at the hotel bar. I had been exhausted from walking around the city all day and had gone to bed early, encouraging Ryan and Jessica to enjoy nightcaps without me. I remembered falling asleep to the sound of their laughter drifting up from the hotel lobby, feeling content that my husband and best friend were bonding and creating good memories together. Now I realized that I had essentially given them permission to spend intimate time together while I slept peacefully upstairs, trusting them completely while they developed the emotional and physical connection that had led to tonight's betrayal. The thought that they might have been laughing about my naivety, or worse, using that time to plan their future together, made me feel sick with anger and humiliation. The text message history between Jessica and me from that San Francisco trip revealed subtle manipulation that I had completely missed at the time. She had been unusually encouraging about me taking time to rest, suggesting that I deserved to relax after working so hard on client projects. She had offered to entertain Ryan when I wanted to sleep in or take breaks, framing it as giving me space for self-care while ensuring he didn't feel abandoned during our vacation. Her messages had been filled with supportive language about how hard I worked and how much I deserved to enjoy our trip without feeling guilty about taking breaks. At the time, her encouragement had felt like thoughtful friendship. Now I understood that she had been creating opportunities to spend time alone with Ryan while making me feel grateful for her consideration and support. The pattern was clear once I knew what to look for. Jessica had been systematically inserting herself into my relationship with Ryan, while simultaneously encouraging me to prioritize work commitments and personal care that created distance between us. She had been playing a long game, building emotional intimacy with my fiancé while positioning herself as my most supportive friend and trusted confidant. The wedding planning process had provided the perfect cover for this manipulation. Jessica's enthusiasm about helping with every detail had given her legitimate reasons to spend time with Ryan discussing logistics, preferences, and decisions. She had been present for cake tastings, venue walkthroughs, and vendor meetings that traditionally involved intimate conversations between couples about their vision for their future together. During those planning sessions, Jessica had been careful to include me in major decisions while taking charge of smaller details that required coordination with Ryan. She had volunteered to be the point of contact for several vendors, ensuring that she would be the one receiving calls and emails that might require input from the groom. These seemingly helpful gestures had created a web of connection between them that excluded me from numerous small interactions throughout the wedding planning process. The final piece of evidence came from reviewing the vendor contracts and payment records for our wedding. Jessica had offered to use her corporate account to pay several vendors up front, claiming it would be easier to manage cash flow if we reimbursed her after the honeymoon rather than juggling multiple payments. During busy work periods, I had been grateful for her financial assistance and organizational skills, never considering that this arrangement gave her significant control over our wedding details and created a paper trail of her involvement in our most intimate celebration. But the payment records showed that Jessica had made changes to several vendor contracts without consulting me, upgrading services, and adding details that would enhance the overall experience. The upgraded photography package included additional hours of coverage and more editing options. The enhanced floral arrangements featured premium flowers that created more dramatic visual impact. The expanded catering menu offered additional courses and premium wine selections. These upgrades had improved our wedding significantly, and I had been touched by Jessica's generosity and attention to detail. But now I wondered if she had been planning to use the enhanced documentation and beautiful setting for her own purposes. Had she been ensuring that any romantic interactions between her and Ryan would be captured by professional photographers and enhanced by premium floral arrangements and lighting? The reality that Jessica had essentially financed the production, value for her own betrayal of my trust was almost too surreal to process. She had invested thousands of dollars and countless hours into creating the perfect backdrop for destroying my marriage while presenting herself as my most devoted friend and supporter. Standing in the bridal suite with broken glass around my feet and devastating evidence on my phone, I finally understood the full scope of what had been happening behind my back. This wasn't a spontaneous attraction that had developed recently. This was a calculated campaign that had been building for months, with Jessica systematically positioning herself to replace me in Ryan's life while maintaining the facade of friendship and support. The question now was how to respond to such comprehensive betrayal in a way that would protect my future while ensuring that Ryan and Jessica faced appropriate consequences for their deception. The video evidence I had captured was just the beginning of what I could reveal if I chose to. Go public with the truth about my wedding day and the months of manipulation that had led to this moment. My phone lit up with notifications as more guests posted photos and videos from the reception, each new image a reminder that while I discovered the truth about my marriage in private, everyone else was still celebrating a fairy tale that had never really existed. The hashtag Sarah and Ryan Forever was trending locally with over 300 posts, creating a digital archive of our supposed love story that now felt like an elaborate performance designed to deceive not just me, but everyone who cared about us. I scrolled through the posts, each one more painful than the last. My cousin from Sacramento had shared a touching caption about how inspiring it was to see true love in action, accompanied by a photo of Ryan and me cutting our wedding cake. Together just 2 hours ago, a college friend had posted a video of our first dance, praising the obvious connection between us and expressing how much hope our relationship gave her for finding lasting love herself. The comments on these posts were filled with heart emojis and congratulations from people who had invested emotionally in our story. But what made my stomach turn was discovering the posts that Jessica had been sharing throughout the evening. Her Instagram story showed a carefully curated behind-the-scenes view of the wedding from the Maid of Honor's perspective. She had documented everything from helping me get dressed this morning to the emotional moment when my father walked me down the aisle. Her captions were filled with language about friendship, loyalty, and the joy of celebrating true love. The most sickening post was a photo Jessica had taken during the ceremony, showing Ryan's face as I walked down the aisle toward him. Her caption read, "The look of a man seeing his dreams come true. So honored to witness this perfect love story unfold. Some people are just meant to be together forever." The irony of her words, posted just hours before I caught her kissing my husband, was almost too much to bear. Jessica's social media presence told a completely different story than the reality I had just discovered. Her posts painted her as the devoted best friend, the supportive maid of honor, and the enthusiastic cheerleader for our relationship. Anyone following her accounts would see evidence of a woman who was genuinely invested in my happiness and committed to helping create the perfect wedding day for someone she clearly loved and supported. The manipulation extended beyond just her public posts to the way she had been shaping other people's perceptions of our relationship dynamics. I realized that Jessica had been subtly positioning herself as the person who understood Ryan best, the friend who could provide insights into his needs and preferences that I apparently couldn't see myself. During wedding planning conversations with vendors and family members, she had often spoken about Ryan's tastes and priorities with an authority that suggested intimate knowledge of his personality. When we were selecting the menu for the reception, Jessica had made comments about Ryan's favorite foods and dining preferences that influenced our final choices. She had convinced me to include a specific type of wine that she claimed Ryan particularly enjoyed, and she had advocated for a dessert option that she said would make him especially happy. At the time, I had been grateful for her insights and her desire to ensure Ryan felt heard and valued in our wedding planning process. Now I understood that her detailed knowledge of his preferences hadn't come from casual friendship, but from private conversations and shared experiences that I knew nothing about. She had been using information gathered through her relationship with Ryan to position herself as more attuned to his needs than I was, subtly undermining my role as his partner while appearing to support our relationship. The pattern extended to her interactions with my family as well. During the rehearsal dinner last night, Jessica had given a speech that had brought tears to my mother's eyes. She had talked about watching our love story develop, about Ryan's devotion to me, and about how perfectly suited we were for each other. She had shared specific anecdotes about moments she had witnessed between us that demonstrated our strong connection and mutual support. But listening to that speech now with the knowledge of what she had been doing behind my back, I heard different layers of meaning in her words. She had been performing the role of supportive friend while actively working to undermine the relationship she was publicly celebrating. Her emotional delivery and seemingly genuine sentiment had convinced everyone, including me, that she was invested in our happiness and committed to our success as a couple. The guestbook messages provided another layer of evidence about how thoroughly Jessica had managed to deceive everyone around us. I had flipped through the pages during cocktail hour, reading the heartfelt wishes and advice from friends and family members. Several guests had specifically mentioned how wonderful it was to see the strong friendship between Jessica and me, commenting on how lucky I was to have such a devoted maid of honor who clearly cared so much about my happiness. My grandmother had written a particularly touching message about the importance of surrounding yourself with loyal friends who would support your marriage through both celebrations and challenges. She had specifically mentioned Jessica by name, expressing gratitude that I had someone so trustworthy and caring in my life to help me navigate the early years of marriage. These messages weren't just painful because they revealed how completely Jessica had fooled everyone. They were devastating because they showed how much emotional investment other people had made in the narrative she had helped create. Our guests hadn't just attended a wedding. They had participated in what they believed was a celebration of authentic love, supported by genuine friendship. The revelation that both the marriage and the friendship were built on deception would disappoint and hurt people who had trusted our story and invested their own hopes and emotions in our supposed happiness. I discovered that Jessica's manipulation had extended to professional relationships as well when I found her LinkedIn post from 3 weeks ago. She had shared an article about successful entrepreneurial couples, tagging both Ryan and me with a caption about how inspiring it was to watch us build businesses while supporting each other's dreams. Her post had generated dozens of comments from mutual professional contacts, many of whom had expressed interest in collaborating with both Mitchell Media Solutions and Ryan's startup. The professional community in Portland was relatively small, especially within the tech and marketing sectors where both Ryan and I worked. Jessica's public endorsement of our relationship and our individual businesses had influenced how other professionals perceived us as potential partners or collaborators. Her apparent insight into our relationship dynamics and her enthusiastic support for our professional goals had lent credibility to opportunities that might not have materialized otherwise. Now I realized that Jessica had been leveraging her position as my best friend and Ryan's confidant to build her own professional reputation as someone with good judgment about character and business partnerships. Her association with what appeared to be a successful, supportive relationship had enhanced her own credibility in professional settings, while she simultaneously worked to destroy the relationship she was publicly endorsing. The wedding planning. Vendors had also been influenced by Jessica's narrative about our relationship. During several vendor meetings, she had taken the lead in describing our vision and priorities as a couple, often speaking about Ryan's preferences with an authority that I had found impressive at the time. The florist, photographer, and even the officiant had commented on how wonderful it was that I had such a knowledgeable friend helping to ensure that our wedding reflected both of our personalities and values. Jessica's detailed knowledge about our relationship history, combined with her enthusiastic support for our wedding plans, had convinced vendors that she was a trustworthy source of information about what would make us happy. They had accepted her input and suggestions as authentic representations of our shared desires, never suspecting that her intimate knowledge came from inappropriate sources or that her enthusiasm was masking ulterior motives. The photographer, David Kim, had been particularly influenced by Jessica's input about capturing candid moments between Ryan and me. She had suggested specific poses and settings that she claimed would showcase our natural connection, and she had provided background information about our relationship milestones that helped him create a shot list for meaningful images. Some of the most romantic photos from our engagement session had been taken based on Jessica's suggestions about locations and scenarios that would highlight our bond. Reviewing those photos now, I wondered if Jessica had been studying our body language and interactions not to help document our love story, but to understand the dynamics she would need to replicate in her own relationship with Ryan. Had she been learning how to position herself to receive the same kind of attention and affection that Ryan showed me during those photo sessions? The manipulation had been so thorough and systematic that it extended to seemingly casual interactions with mutual friends and acquaintances. At social gatherings over the past several months, Jessica had consistently reinforced the narrative of our perfect relationship while subtly positioning herself as the friend who understood both Ryan and me better than anyone else understood us individually. During conversations with other couples in our social circle, Jessica had often shared observations about our relationship strengths and challenges that demonstrated her supposed insight into our private dynamics. She had praised Ryan's communication skills, his emotional intelligence, and his commitment to supporting my career ambitions. she had also made subtle comments about areas where I could be more attentive to his needs, framing these observations as helpful insights from someone who cared about both of us. These conversations had influenced how other people perceived our relationship balance and individual contributions to our partnership. Friends had begun to see Jessica as a valuable source of relationship wisdom, someone who could provide perspective on how to maintain strong connections while pursuing individual goals. Her apparent success in understanding what made our relationship work had enhanced her reputation as someone with good judgment about love and partnership. The social media documentation of our relationship over the past year told a story that Jessica had carefully helped craft through her own posts and her influence on mine. She had been present for most of our significant moments, from anniversary, celebrations to professional milestones to family gatherings. Her presence in these moments had been documented through photos and videos that suggested a natural, long-standing friendship that enhanced rather than threatened our romantic relationship. The sound of laughter drifted through the bridal suite windows as my wedding reception continued in blissful ignorance just 50 yards away. My guests were still dancing, still celebrating, still posting photos with captions about true love and happily ever after, completely unaware that the bride they were honoring had just discovered the most devastating betrayal imaginable. But as I stood there clutching my phone with its damning video evidence, a realization began to crystallize that would change everything about how I approached this catastrophe. I wasn't just Sarah Mitchell, the betrayed bride whose husband and best friend had destroyed her wedding day. I was Sarah Mitchell, one of Portland's most skilled social media strategists, a woman who understood viral content, audience psychology, and digital influence better than almost anyone in the Pacific Northwest. The same expertise that had built Mitchell Media Solutions from nothing into a thriving consultancy was about to become the weapon I used to ensure that Ryan and Jessica faced consequences for their calculated cruelty. My phone contained more than just evidence of their betrayal. It contained the raw material for what could become one of the most powerful viral stories of the year. A narrative that would resonate with millions of people who had experienced betrayal, deception, and the particular pain of discovering that the people they trusted most had been working against them. The irony was almost poetic. Jessica had helped finance the premium photography and videography that would document her own downfall, while Ryan had provided the startup industry connections that would amplify the damage to his professional reputation. But my advantage went far beyond just having viral-worthy content. Over the past 3 years, I had built an engaged social media following of nearly 50,000 people across Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, with an additional 20,000 subscribers to my YouTube channel where I shared marketing insights and behind-the-scenes content from running a successful consultancy. My audience trusted me because I had always been authentic about both my professional successes and personal challenges. They had been following my wedding planning journey for months, emotionally investing in my happiness and celebrating each milestone along the way. The engagement and loyalty of my audience wasn't accidental. It was the result of careful strategy and genuine connection. I had shared vulnerable moments about the stress of building a business, the challenges of maintaining work-life balance, and the joy of planning a wedding while managing demanding clients. My followers felt like they knew me personally, and many had shared their own stories of entrepreneurship, relationship milestones, and life transitions in response to my content. This established relationship with my audience meant that when I shared the truth about what had happened at my wedding, it wouldn't be perceived as random drama or attention-seeking behavior. It would be seen as a trusted friend sharing a devastating experience, asking for support during the most difficult moment of her life. The emotional investment my followers had already made in my story would amplify their response to this betrayal, creating the kind of authentic engagement that money couldn't buy and algorithms couldn't ignore. My professional network provided another layer of strategic advantage that Ryan and Jessica had failed to consider. Through Mitchell Media Solutions, I had developed relationships with journalists, influencers, and content creators throughout the region and beyond. Many of my clients had become personal friends who respected my business ethics and appreciated the results I had delivered for their brands. These relationships represented years of trust building and mutual support that could be mobilized if I chose to make my story public. Amanda Foster, the CEO of Jessica's agency, was someone I had collaborated with on several projects over the past 2 years. We had developed a professional friendship based on shared values about ethical marketing practices and authentic brand representation. Amanda's agency prided itself on working with clients who demonstrated integrity in both their business practices and personal conduct, and she had often spoken about how personal character influenced professional competence. A public scandal involving one of her senior employees would be particularly damaging because it would contradict everything Amanda's agency claimed to represent. The timing of this discovery created additional strategic opportunities that my marketing background helped me recognize immediately. Wedding season was in full swing, meaning that content about marriage, relationships, and wedding planning was already trending across all social platforms. Stories about wedding disasters, vendor failures, and relationship drama consistently performed well because they tapped into universal fears and experiences that resonated with broad audiences. But beyond just seasonal relevance, my story had elements that would appeal to multiple demographic groups and interest categories. Women who had experienced betrayal by friends would connect with the maid of honor angle. Entrepreneurs would be outraged by Ryan's calculated plan to use my business connections before leaving me. People planning their own weddings would be simultaneously horrified and fascinated by the idea that such deception could be happening behind the scenes of what appeared to be a perfect celebration. The video evidence I had captured was professionally quality thanks to the premium photography package that Jessica had upgraded without my knowledge. The lighting from the string lights created beautiful ambiance, the audio was crystal clear, and the framing captured both the kiss and the intimate conversation that revealed the full scope of their deception. This wasn't grainy amateur footage that could be dismissed or questioned. It was broadcast quality content that would be impossible to deny or explain away. My background in content creation meant I also understood the technical aspects of maximizing viral potential. I knew which platforms to prioritize for initial distribution, how to optimize captions and hashtags for algorithm preference, and how to time releases for maximum engagement. I understood the importance of creating multiple formats of the same content. A long-form video for YouTube, shorter clips for TikTok and Instagram Reels, still images with compelling captions for Twitter and Facebook, and behind the scenes content that would sustain interest over several days or weeks. The legal protections I had in place as a business owner provided another crucial advantage. My LLC structure and comprehensive business insurance included coverage for personal liability and reputation management, meaning I had resources available to protect myself against potential retaliation or legal challenges. More importantly, the video evidence had been captured on my own property during my own wedding reception, making it legally unquestionable from a privacy standpoint. Ryan's startup provided a particularly vulnerable target for reputation damage because the tech industry in Portland was relatively small and interconnected. His company was actively seeking Series A funding, which meant potential investors would be conducting thorough background checks and due diligence research that would certainly uncover any viral scandal involving the co-founder. Venture capital firms were notoriously risk-averse when it came to personal conduct issues, especially those involving deception and betrayal that could indicate poor judgment or character flaws that might affect business decisions. Mark Thompson, Ryan's business partner, had always been the more public face of their startup, handling most investor meetings and media interviews while Ryan focused on product development. This dynamic meant that Ryan's personal reputation was particularly important to their funding prospects, since investors would be evaluating whether he could be trusted with fiduciary responsibility for their investment capital. A viral video, Showing calculated deception and betrayal would raise serious questions about his integrity and decision-making abilities. The corporate client base that both Jessica and I served through our respective agencies created additional opportunities for strategic pressure. Many of the same companies worked with both Foster & Associates and Mitchell Media Solutions, creating a competitive dynamic where reputation and trustworthiness were crucial differentiators. A public scandal involving Jessica would force these mutual clients to choose sides or distance themselves from the controversy, potentially damaging her agency's relationships and revenue. My established relationships with local media outlets provided direct access to amplification opportunities that could extend the story's reach beyond social media into traditional news coverage. I had been featured in Portland Business Journal, articles about successful women entrepreneurs, and I had appeared on local morning shows to discuss social media marketing trends. These existing relationships with journalists and producers meant I could potentially secure mainstream media coverage that would legitimize the story and expand its impact beyond just viral social content. The seasonal timing also created opportunities for broader conversation about wedding industry practices, vendor accountability, and the pressure couples face to create perfect celebrations. My story could become a catalyst for discussions about authenticity versus performance in social media wedding culture, the stress of wedding planning, and the importance of trust in close relationships. These broader themes would help sustain interest in the story beyond just the initial shock value of the betrayal itself. My documentation habits as a content creator meant I had extensive evidence of the manipulation and deception that had led to this moment. The screenshots of text conversations, photos from recent months showing suspicious body language, and records of financial transactions related to wedding planning would provide comprehensive context that would make the video evidence even more damaging. This wasn't just a single moment of poor judgment. It was the culmination of months of calculated betrayal that I could prove through digital evidence. The professional consequences for Jessica extended beyond just her current job to her future career prospects in Portland's marketing community. The industry was small enough that reputation damage would follow her to any new position, and the specific nature of her betrayal, using wedding planning activities to deceive a friend while pursuing her friend's fiancé, would make her particularly unsuitable for client-facing roles that required trust and relationship management skills. Ryan's damage would be even more extensive, because startup founders were public figures whose personal conduct reflected directly on their company's values and culture. Potential employees, customers, and business partners would all have legitimate concerns about working with someone who had demonstrated such calculated deception in his personal relationships. The tech industry's emphasis on transparency, innovation, and ethical leadership made personal integrity scandals particularly damaging to professional prospects. The international nature of social media meant that the story's impact wouldn't be limited to Portland or even the United States. Wedding content and relationship drama had global appeal, especially when it involved the kind of dramatic betrayal and strategic deception that made for compelling narrative arcs. The story could potentially reach millions of people worldwide, creating a level of exposure that would follow Ryan and Jessica for years, regardless of any career changes or geographic relocations they might attempt. My understanding of crisis communication strategies also gave me advantages in controlling the narrative and anticipating potential responses from Ryan and Jessica. I knew they would likely attempt damage control through their own social media accounts, possibly claiming the video was taken out of context or that their relationship had developed only recently. But my comprehensive documentation of their manipulation over several months would make such explanations impossible to sustain. The wedding venue itself provided additional strategic advantages because Riverside Gardens Estate was a popular location that hosted dozens of weddings throughout the year. Other couples who had celebrated there would be able to identify the location immediately, and vendor relationships would ensure that news of the scandal spread quickly through Portland's wedding industry network. This organic amplification would supplement any intentional viral strategy I chose to implement. My business relationships with other marketing professionals meant I had access to expertise in crisis management, reputation repair, and strategic communication that could help me navigate the potential consequences of going public with my story. Unlike Ryan and Jessica, who would be reacting defensively to unexpected exposure, I could plan proactively to protect my business interests and personal reputation while maximizing the impact on their careers and social standing. The evidence I possessed wasn't just comprehensive, it was irrefutable. The combination of high-quality video, clear audio, supporting documentation, and witness testimony from Emma created a case that couldn't be disputed or explained away. This meant that any attempts at denial or misdirection from Ryan and Jessica would only compound their problems by adding dishonesty about the evidence to their existing credibility issues. As I stood in the bridal suite processing all of these strategic advantages, I realized that Ryan and Jessica had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had betrayed someone whose profession was built on understanding influence, audience psychology, and viral content creation. They had conducted their deception in full view of someone trained to document everything and analyze patterns of behavior. Most critically, they had underestimated the power differential between someone who controlled her own narrative and people who were about to become subjects of someone else's story. The broken champagne glass scattered around my feet suddenly seemed like the perfect metaphor for their situation rather than mine. They were the ones whose carefully constructed deception was about to shatter into pieces that could never be reassembled. I was standing amid the debris of my marriage, but I was also standing in a position of unprecedented power to determine exactly how this story would be told and what consequences would follow from their choices. The realization that I held such comprehensive advantages didn't eliminate the pain of betrayal or the devastation of losing my marriage and closest friendship on what should have been the happiest day of my life, but it provided a framework for transforming that pain into purpose, that devastation into decisive action that would ensure justice for the calculated cruelty I had experienced. My phone buzzed with another notification from the reception, a photo tagged with our wedding hashtag showing guests still dancing and celebrating in blissful ignorance of the drama unfolding just yards away. But instead of feeling defeated by the contrast between their joy and my pain, I felt energized by the recognition that I possessed all the tools necessary to rewrite this narrative entirely. The story they thought they were living, where they could betray me without consequences while I suffered in silence, was about to become a very different story, one where actions had appropriate consequences, and where someone with the skills to demand justice actually used those skills effectively. The hidden advantage they had failed to consider was that they had chosen to destroy someone who was professionally equipped to destroy them in return. The clock on my phone read 10:15 p.m. as I made the decision that would alter the trajectory of multiple lives forever. I opened my video editing app and began crafting what would become one of the most viral wedding disaster stories in social media history. My hands moved with practiced precision as I trimmed the footage to its most impactful moments, adjusting audio levels to ensure Ryan and Jessica's conversation about using my business connections would be crystal clear to viewers. The editing process felt strangely therapeutic, transforming my raw pain into strategic content that would serve a purpose beyond just personal vindication. I created 3 versions of the video: a complete 90-second version for YouTube that included full context and conversation, a 30-second highlight reel for Instagram and TikTok that focused on the most shocking visual moments, and a series of still frames with overlay text for Twitter and Facebook that would be easily shareable across different social media ecosystems. For the caption, I wrote with the same authentic voice that had built my following over 3 years of consistent content creation. I explained the situation without melodrama, focusing on facts rather than emotions, and positioning the story as a cautionary tale about trust and authenticity, rather than simply seeking sympathy. The tone was professional yet vulnerable, angry yet controlled, devastated yet empowered. I scheduled the post to go live simultaneously across all platforms at 11 p.m., giving me enough time to prepare for the immediate aftermath while ensuring Maximum impact as people scrolled through social media before bed. The timing was strategic, late enough that the wedding reception would be winding down, preventing immediate confrontation, but early enough to catch the evening social media engagement peak when posts were most likely to gain traction. At exactly 11 p.m., I hit publish and watched as the first wave of responses began flooding in within minutes. The initial comments were expressions of shock and support from my regular followers, but within 30 minutes, the posts were being shared. Beyond my immediate audience, as the story's inherent drama caught the attention of broader social media algorithms. The video on TikTok reached 100,000 views in the first hour, with comments ranging from outrage on my behalf to detailed analysis of Jessica and Ryan's body language in the footage. Users began creating their own response videos, sharing similar stories of wedding day betrayals and relationship deceptions that amplified the conversation beyond just my specific situation. Instagram engagement was equally explosive, with the post receiving over 5,000 comments in the first 2 hours, as my followers tagged friends, shared their own experiences, and expressed disbelief at the audacity of the betrayal. The site's wedding hashtag that had been celebrating our love story throughout the evening was suddenly dominated by discussions of the viral video, completely transforming the narrative around our celebration. Twitter proved to be the most powerful platform for amplification, as users with large followings began retweeting the story with their own commentary about betrayal, friendship, and the performative nature of social media relationships. Several blue-check-marked accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers picked up the story, ensuring it reached audiences far beyond my immediate network. By midnight, I was receiving direct messages from journalists at major publications requesting interviews and additional information. A producer from a popular morning television show had already reached out about a potential appearance to discuss the story. Multiple podcast hosts were asking if I would be willing to share more details about the deception and its impact on my business relationships. The local Portland media was particularly quick to respond, with reporters from the Oregonian and Portland Business Journal requesting statements about how the personal scandal might affect my professional reputation and client relationships. The intersection of personal drama and business implications made the story particularly newsworthy in a city where the professional community was interconnected and reputation-based. Meanwhile, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from wedding guests who were just discovering the viral posts. Emma had stayed late at the reception to observe Ryan and Jessica's behavior after my disappearance, reporting that they had seemed increasingly nervous as the evening progressed, and several guests began checking their phones and whispering among themselves. My mother called in tears, having seen the video shared by one of her Facebook friends before I had a chance to warn her about what I had posted. The conversation was painful, but necessary, as I explained the full scope of what I had discovered and my decision to make the truth public rather than suffer in silence. Her initial shock gave way to fierce support as she processed the calculated nature of the betrayal I had endured. Ryan's business partner, Mark Thompson, was among the first people to call, expressing his horror at what he had witnessed in the video and immediately distancing himself from Ryan's actions. He explained that potential investors would certainly become aware of the viral scandal and that the company would need to consider whether Ryan's continued involvement was compatible with their funding goals and professional reputation. Jessica's sister reached out through Instagram direct message, claiming she had no knowledge of the affair, but expressing shame about her sister's actions and support for my decision to expose the truth. She shared that Jessica had always been competitive and manipulative in relationships, providing context that validated my growing understanding of how systematically I had been deceived. By 2 a.m., the story had been picked up by several major online publications, with articles appearing on BuzzFeed, People magazine's website, and various relationship and wedding planning blogs. The headlines ranged from sensationalist to sympathetic, but all focused on the dramatic nature of discovering betrayal through video evidence at the actual wedding reception. The comment sections of these articles revealed the universal nature of the emotions my story had triggered. Thousands of people shared their own experiences of betrayal, deception, and the particular pain of discovering that trusted friends had been working against them. Many specifically related to the wedding context, sharing stories of friendships that had been destroyed by jealousy and competition around major life events. Ryan attempted damage control around 3 a.m. with a poorly crafted Instagram post claiming that the video had been taken out of context and that his relationship with Jessica had only recently developed. His explanation was immediately contradicted by dozens of commenters who had noticed their interactions at previous social events, and by screenshots that observant social media users had captured from Jessica's posts over the past several months. Jessica's response was even more damaging to her credibility. She posted a long Instagram story claiming that she had been trying to comfort Ryan about pre-wedding anxiety, and that the kiss had been a misunderstanding of supportive friendship. The explanation was so obviously false that it generated additional viral content as users created memes and commentary videos mocking her attempt to reframe obvious romantic intimacy as platonic support. The professional consequences began materializing almost immediately. Amanda Foster from Jessica's agency called me directly at 6 a.m. to express her personal apology and professional concerns about the situation. She explained that Foster and associates would be conducting an internal review of Jessica's employment, and that several clients had already expressed concerns about working with someone whose personal conduct contradicted the agency's values. Ryan's startup faced even more immediate damage as potential investors began withdrawing from scheduled meetings and expressing concerns about the company's leadership stability. The tech industry's emphasis on personal integrity and decision-making ability made the viral video particularly damaging to investor confidence, regardless of Ryan's technical skills or the product's market potential. Media requests continued throughout the morning as the story gained momentum on traditional news platforms. I accepted interviews with 3 major outlets, focusing on the business implications of personal integrity and the importance of authenticity in professional relationships. My messaging remained consistent and strategic, positioning myself as someone who had been betrayed but was responding with strength and transparency. The wedding vendor community rallied around me in unexpected ways, with several businesses offering services for a future celebration or vow renewal ceremony free of charge. The photographer David Kim released a statement supporting my decision to expose the deception and offering to provide documentation if I needed additional evidence for any legal proceedings. Legal implications became relevant when Jessica's family attorney sent a cease and desist letter demanding removal of the video content, claiming privacy violations and defamation. My business attorney responded within hours, explaining that the content had been recorded at my own event on property I had legal access to, and that truth was an absolute defense against defamation claims. The legal pressure actually generated additional media attention as journalists covered the free speech and privacy issues raised by social media exposure of private betrayals. By the end of the first week, the video had accumulated over 10 million views across all platforms, making it one of the most viral wedding disaster stories in social media history. The hashtag associated with my story was trending nationally, and the incident had spawned dozens of commentary videos, podcast discussions, and think pieces about modern relationships, social media authenticity, and the consequences of betrayal. In the digital age, the long-term professional impact varied significantly for each person involved. My business actually benefited from the attention, as my response to crisis demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking and authentic communication that attracted new clients who valued transparency and integrity. Mitchell Media Solutions gained over 15 new client contracts in the month following the viral incident, with several companies specifically mentioning my handling of the situation as evidence of my professional competence. Jessica's career suffered irreparable damage as the viral video became permanently associated with her professional reputation. Foster and Associates terminated her employment after completing their internal review, and subsequent job applications in Portland's tight-knit marketing community were unsuccessful, as employers expressed concerns about potential client reactions. to her involvement in such a public scandal. Ryan's startup ultimately failed to secure Series A funding, with multiple investors citing concerns about leadership stability and decision-making judgment. Mark Thompson eventually bought out Ryan's share of the company and continued development with new technical partners. But the association with the viral scandal had permanently damaged the original business relationships and investor confidence. The personal aftermath was equally dramatic, but ultimately healing in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The overwhelming support from strangers, friends, and professional colleagues helped me process the betrayal and rebuild confidence in my ability to trust my instincts about people's character. The viral response also connected me with other women who had experienced similar betrayals, creating a support network that extended far beyond my original social circle. 6 months after the wedding disaster, I was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference about crisis management and authentic leadership. The experience of transforming personal betrayal into professional opportunity had become a case study in reputation management and strategic communication that resonated with business audiences facing their own challenges. The story's impact extended beyond just social media virality to influence conversations about wedding culture, friendship dynamics, and the role of social media in holding people accountable for their actions. Multiple academic researchers contacted me about including the incident in studies about digital activism, viral communication patterns, and the intersection of personal and professional reputation in the social media age. Ryan and Jessica's relationship ultimately lasted less than 6 months after the viral exposure, ending acrimoniously as the stress of public scrutiny and professional consequences destroyed whatever foundation their connection had been built on. Both relocated to different cities to escape the ongoing attention and start over professionally. But the digital permanence of viral content meant that the story continued to surface in background checks and Google searches for years afterward. The Italian honeymoon that was supposed to represent the beginning of my married life became a solo trip that marked the beginning of my journey toward authentic independence and self-advocacy. The experience of traveling alone, processing the betrayal, and planning my next chapter without accommodating anyone else's needs or preferences was transformative in ways that a traditional honeymoon never could have been. 2 years later, I was featured in Harvard Business Review's article about women entrepreneurs who had turned personal crises into professional advantages. The piece highlighted how my response to betrayal had demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking, authentic communication, and crisis management skills that were valuable in business contexts beyond just social media marketing. The wedding dress was donated to a nonprofit organization that provides formal wear for women entering the workforce, transforming a symbol of betrayal into an opportunity for someone else's professional advancement. The decision felt symbolic of how I had learned to transmute painful experiences into positive outcomes that served purposes beyond just personal healing. Emma Rodriguez became my business partner and closest friend, with her loyalty during the crisis proving the foundation for a professional relationship that enhanced both our careers. The experience taught me to value authentic relationships over convenient ones and to trust people's actions rather than their words when evaluating character and reliability. The viral video remained online as a permanent record of the consequences of betrayal, deception, and the underestimation of someone's capacity for strategic response. Comments continued appearing years later from people who discovered the story and found inspiration in my refusal to suffer silently or protect people who had deliberately caused me harm. The most unexpected outcome was receiving messages from other wedding vendors, photographers, and planners who had witnessed similar betrayals at events they had worked but felt unable to intervene or expose the truth. My story apparently gave permission for others to speak up about deception they had observed, creating broader conversations about the responsibility of wedding professionals to support honest relationships and authentic celebrations. The experience fundamentally changed my approach to both personal relationships and professional partnerships, prioritizing transparency, authentic communication, and alignment of values over convenience or social expectations. The viral moment that had seemed like the worst possible outcome for my wedding day ultimately became the catalyst for creating a more authentic and fulfilling life than I had ever imagined possible. 5 years later, Mitchell Media Solutions had expanded nationally with a reputation for authentic brand representation and crisis communication expertise that directly traced back to how I had handled my own public scandal. The business success that grew from transforming betrayal into strategic opportunity proved that sometimes the most devastating setbacks create foundations for achievements that would have been impossible without the crisis that demanded growth, strength, and authenticity. 3 years after that devastating night when I discovered my husband and best friend's betrayal through my own camera lens, I stood on the stage of the Portland Convention Center addressing a crowd of 800 women entrepreneurs at the Pacific Northwest Business Summit. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was speaking about authentic leadership and crisis transformation in the same city where my marriage had imploded in the most public way imaginable. But the woman delivering that keynote speech bore little resemblance to the broken bride who had stood amid champagne glass shards in a bridal suite, clutching evidence of unthinkable deception. The presentation I was giving had evolved from a workshop I'd developed called Turning Betrayal into Breakthrough, which had become one of the most requested speaking topics in the business conference circuit. What had started as my personal strategy for surviving public humiliation had transformed into a methodology that helped other women navigate professional and personal crises with dignity and strategic thinking. The audience hung on every word as I shared the framework that had carried me from devastation to unprecedented success. Mitchell Media Solutions had grown from a regional consultancy into a nationally recognized agency specializing in crisis communication and authentic brand representation. The client waiting list extended 6 months out, with companies specifically seeking our services because they wanted to work with someone who had demonstrated the ability to transform reputation damage into competitive advantage. The viral wedding video that had initially seemed like professional suicide had actually become the foundation for building one of the most trusted personal brands in the digital marketing industry. The transformation hadn't happened overnight or without significant challenges. The first 6 months after the viral incident had been a roller coaster of intense media attention, legal complications, and the complex process of rebuilding my identity as a single woman and business owner. Every interview request, every speaking opportunity, and every new client contract had required careful consideration of how to leverage the attention while maintaining professional credibility and personal authenticity. The speaking engagement today was particularly meaningful because it represented the completion of a journey that had taken me from victim to victor, from betrayed wife to empowered entrepreneur, from viral sensation to respected thought leader. The audience included many women who had followed my story from the beginning, watching through social media as I navigated divorce proceedings, business expansion, and the gradual construction of a new life built entirely on my own terms. Emma Rodriguez, who had become my business partner and closest confidant, sat in the front row, beaming with pride as I delivered the closing remarks of my presentation. Her loyalty during those dark early days had proven to be the foundation for both a thriving business partnership and an unshakable friendship that had replaced the toxic dynamic I'd shared with Jessica. The contrast between authentic support and manipulative deception had become crystal clear through Emma's consistent presence during both celebrations and crises. The book deal that had emerged from the viral story had exceeded everyone's expectations, spending 12 weeks on various bestseller lists and generating speaking opportunities across the country. The Viral Truth: How Authentic Response to Betrayal became my biggest business advantage had resonated with readers far beyond the original social media audience, connecting with anyone who had experienced deception in personal or professional relationships and needed a roadmap for strategic recovery. The documentary that premiered last month on a major streaming platform had brought the story to an even broader audience, featuring interviews with wedding industry professionals, social media experts, and relationship therapologists who analyzed the cultural significance of my decision to expose betrayal publicly rather than suffer in silence. The film had sparked renewed conversation about accountability, authenticity, and the role of social media in modern relationship dynamics. Ryan's attempt at a comeback had been less successful than his original startup ventures. After relocating to Austin and attempting to rebuild his reputation in a new tech market, he had struggled to overcome the permanent digital footprint of the viral video. Potential business partners and investors continued to discover the story during routine background research, making it difficult for him to secure the trust and funding necessary for entrepreneurial success. His second startup had failed to gain traction partly due to lingering questions about his character and judgment that made investors hesitant to commit significant resources. The productivity app that had once seemed so promising had been overshadowed by questions about whether someone who had demonstrated such poor personal decision-making could be trusted with fiduciary responsibility for other people's money. Jessica's professional rehabilitation had been even more challenging, as the marketing industry's emphasis on trust and relationship management made her viral association with deception particularly damaging to career prospects. After several unsuccessful attempts to rebuild her reputation in different markets, she had eventually left the marketing field entirely and relocated to a small town in Montana, where she worked for a nonprofit organization focused on environmental conservation. The geographic and professional distance seemed to have provided some measure of peace for Jessica, though mutual acquaintances reported that she remained deeply affected by the long-term consequences of her choices. The nonprofit work appeared to be genuinely fulfilling for her, suggesting that perhaps the crisis had ultimately led her toward more authentic alignment with her values, even if the path had been painful and publicly humiliating. The legal aftermath had been resolved more quickly than anyone anticipated, with Jessica's defamation claims being dismissed due to the truthful nature of the video evidence and the public interest in exposing deception. The privacy arguments had failed because the recording had been made at my own wedding reception, where I had both legal right to document events and reasonable expectation that attendees understood they were participating in a photographed celebration. The financial settlement from the divorce had been surprisingly straightforward, with Ryan's desire to avoid additional public scrutiny leading him to accept terms that were heavily favorable to me. The house we had planned to purchase together became mine alone, along with most of our shared assets and investments. His startup equity, which might have been valuable in different circumstances, had become essentially worthless due to the reputational damage that prevented successful fundraising. The wedding vendors who had witnessed the aftermath of my viral revelation had become some of my strongest professional advocates, referring clients to Mitchell Media Solutions and speaking publicly about the importance of authentic communication in crisis situations. The wedding industry's tight-knit community had largely rallied around me, viewing my response to betrayal as an example of the kind of integrity and strategic thinking they wanted to support in their professional relationships. David Kim, the photographer who had captured our engagement photos and wedding ceremony, had become a regular collaborator on projects that required high-quality visual content. His documentation of authentic moments and genuine emotions had proven invaluable for clients who wanted to communicate sincerity and trustworthiness through their marketing materials. The professional relationship that had begun with documenting fake happiness had evolved into creating content that celebrated genuine success and transformation. The personal relationships that had survived the viral scandal had become deeper and more meaningful than the surface-level connections I had maintained during my marriage. The crisis had served as a filter that revealed which people in my life were capable of offering genuine support during difficult times versus those who were only present for convenient socializing and shared celebrations. My family relationships had actually strengthened through the experience, as my mother and extended relatives saw how I had handled adversity with grace and strategic thinking. The initial shame and embarrassment about the public nature of my marital failure had given way to pride in my resilience and the positive outcomes I had created from devastating circumstances. The romantic aspect of my life had evolved more slowly, with dating and new relationships requiring careful navigation due to my public profile and the viral story that anyone could discover with a simple Google search. However, The experience had taught me to value authentic connection over convenience and to trust my instincts about people's character rather than accepting surface-level presentations of personality and values. The man I had been dating for the past 8 months was someone I had met through professional networking rather than social media or dating apps. His initial awareness of my story had actually been reassuring rather than concerning, as it meant he understood my history and had chosen to pursue a relationship based on who I had become rather than who I had been during my marriage. The business. Opportunities that had emerged from the viral attention had far exceeded anything I could have achieved through traditional marketing and networking strategies. Speaking engagements, consulting contracts, and strategic partnerships had materialized from the credibility I had gained by demonstrating authentic leadership during a public crisis. The reputation for handling difficult situations with intelligence and integrity had become more valuable than any traditional credentials or industry connections. The expansion of Mitchell Media Solutions into crisis communication consulting had opened entirely new markets and revenue streams that wouldn't have been accessible without the first-hand experience of managing viral attention and reputation challenges. Clients facing their own scandals, betrayals, or public relations disasters sought our services specifically because they knew we understood the emotional and strategic complexities of managing personal and professional reputation simultaneously. The mentorship program I had developed for women entrepreneurs facing personal crises had become one of the most fulfilling aspects of my professional evolution. Working with other women who were navigating divorce, betrayal, business challenges, or public scrutiny allowed me to transform my own painful experience into guidance that helped others avoid the mistakes I had made and accelerate their own recovery and growth. The online course that had grown from my speaking content now served thousands of students worldwide, providing frameworks for authentic communication, crisis management, and strategic reputation building that could be applied to various personal and professional challenges. The global reach of digital education had allowed me to impact lives far beyond what would have been possible through individual consulting or local speaking engagements. The annual scholarship I had established for women entrepreneurs recovering from personal setbacks had become a meaningful way to ensure that my story's impact extended beyond just my own business success. Supporting other women through financial assistance and mentorship created a lasting legacy that transformed my individual triumph into systemic change that would benefit future generations of women facing similar challenges. The media training. Workshops I conducted for business leaders focused on authentic communication during crisis situations had become sought-after professional development opportunities. Teaching other executives how to maintain credibility and trust while navigating difficult circumstances allowed me to share the strategic insights I had gained while helping others avoid the reputation damage that could result from poor crisis communication. The authenticity that had been forced upon me through public exposure of my most vulnerable moment had become my greatest professional asset and personal strength. The inability to hide behind facades or pretense had taught me to build relationships and business opportunities based on genuine value and transparent communication, rather than carefully managed impressions and strategic deception. The viral video that had initially felt like the end of my world had actually marked the beginning of a more fulfilling and successful chapter than I had ever imagined possible. The forced authenticity had eliminated the exhausting work of maintaining false narratives and allowed me to build a life and career based entirely on truth, integrity, and genuine connection with others who valued those same principles. The social media following that had grown from the original viral moment had evolved into a community of people who supported authentic living, strategic thinking, and the transformation of adversity into opportunity. The content I shared now focused on business insights, personal growth, and the ongoing journey of building a meaningful life rather than dwelling on past betrayals or maintaining victim status. The speaking opportunities that had emerged from my story had taken me to conferences and events across the country and internationally, allowing me to share insights about resilience, authenticity, and strategic response to crisis with audiences who could benefit from both the practical strategies and the emotional inspiration of transformation. Each presentation reinforced my own growth while contributing to positive change in other people's lives and careers. The podcast I had launched 2 years after the viral incident had grown into one of the top-rated business shows focused on women's entrepreneurship and authentic leadership. The weekly conversations with other women who had overcome significant challenges provided ongoing inspiration for my own continued growth while building a platform that amplified voices and stories that might otherwise go unheard. Standing on that stage in Portland, looking out at hundreds of women who had been inspired by my journey from betrayal to breakthrough, I felt the full weight of how completely my life had transformed. The woman who had been deceived by her closest friend and husband had evolved into someone who helped others navigate their own challenges with courage, strategy, and authentic communication. The closing ovation lasted several minutes, with many audience members on their feet expressing appreciation, not just for the content of my presentation, but for the example I had set about turning devastating setbacks into unprecedented opportunities. The energy in the room was electric with possibility, as other women recognized that their own challenges could become foundations for growth rather than barriers to success. As I walked off the stage that evening, I realized that the viral video from my wedding reception had given me something far more valuable than the marriage it had destroyed. It had given me the opportunity to discover my own strength, build authentic relationships based on truth rather than convenience, and create a career that merged personal purpose with professional success in ways that would have been impossible if I had remained in the safe but ultimately hollow life I had been living before that devastating night. The transformation was complete, but the story continued to evolve as each new day brought opportunities to apply the lessons learned through crisis to help others, build meaningful work, and live with the kind of authenticity that made every challenge an opportunity for growth rather than a source of shame or defeat. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.